Greetings from West Thumb Geyser Basin and welcome on another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. Today's virtual Yellowstone tour is from West Thumb, which is right on the shores of Yellowstone Lake, to Old Faithful and the Upper Geyser Basin. Please take a look at a map of the park to see where we're traveling today. You can see the map at one of our sites, westyellowstonelodge.com/map. That's westyellowstonelodge.com/map, and I will drop a copy of the map in over here. If you take a look at the map, you will see that Yellowstone is a gigantic park, and the roads through the park make up a massive figure of 8. There's a road that cuts through the middle between Norris Geyser Basin and Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, which divides the massive figure of 8 into 2 loops, and companies like ours, tour companies, divide their tours into separate tours of the upper loop and the lower loop of Yellowstone. Today we're right at the very bottom, right at the southernmost portion of Yellowstone's lower loop. If you look at the very bottom, you can see West Thumb Geyser Basin. If you continued straight from West Thumb, you'll get to Yellowstone's south entrance and then on to the Rockefeller Parkway, Grand Teton National Park, and then the Jackson Hole area in Jackson, Wyoming itself. If we were to have gone in the other direction from where we're going at the moment, we would have gone from West Thumb Geyser Basin to Fishing Bridge, and incidentally you can see both of those routes in others of our virtual Yellowstone tour. So today we're traveling between West Thumb and Old Faithful. West Thumb Geyser Basin, as I mentioned, is right on the shores of Yellowstone Lake. The lake is so incredibly blue. On the other side of the lake you've got towering mountains, and the geyser basin is situated right in that beautiful environment. And this is one of the reasons that it's my favorite geyser basin in all of Yellowstone. And not only that, it's also a geyser basin that is not anywhere near as popular as the other geyser basins, which are located on the more or less southwest portion of the lower loop. And by those I mean the Upper Geyser Basin, where Old Faithful is, the Midway Geyser Basin, and the Lower Geyser Basin. There are 3 main geyser basins in this part of the park, and those are the three that I've just mentioned. The Lower Geyser Basin, which is home to Fountain Paintpot, the Midway Geyser Basin, which is best known for being where Excelsior Geyser is, Excelsior Geyser is there, but it's best known for being where Grand Prismatic Spring is, which is one of Yellowstone's most iconic sites. And then the Upper Geyser Basin, which in addition to Old Faithful has got so many other thermal features, and I hope I have a chance before the end of this virtual Yellowstone tour to tell you about some of them. So that's where the bulk of Yellowstone's visitors go to see geysers, hot springs, mud pots and fumaroles. But if you travel just, I think it's another 17 miles from the Upper Geyser Basin area, you'll be at West Thumb. I always say that in Yellowstone, if you take the number of miles, add 50% onto it, that'll tell you approximately how long it'll take without stopping. So it's about 25-26 minutes from the Upper Geyser Basin to West Thumb. And once you get there, the views are so stunning. There used to be, can you see the bikers? I suspect we're going to see a lot more of them. There's a rally called Sturgis, which is the largest motorbike rally in the world, taking place next week in Sturgis. It's a small town of about 7,000 people, You notice a sign that says Divide Picnic Area. We're going to cross the Continental Divide twice, and I will tell you more about that. Sturgis is a small town of 7,000 people, and you get 250,000 bikers descending on them, on that town for that festival. I've always wondered just how on earth can a tiny place like that manage to host all those people. Here is the Continental Divide for the first time. We will go over it. We will go over it a second time, and I'll talk about it once I've finished with West Thumb. You don't have any lodging at West Thumb anymore. You used to have a campground there. You used to have cabins. There was a cafeteria. There was a photo shop. This was obviously before the days of digital media. But sometime in the 1980s, the Park Service decided to get rid of all that and restored West Thumb to its more natural state. Can you see these mature trees here? The predominant tree in the Yellowstone area is lodgepole pines, and we can see that those are mature ones because the growth, the branches and the leaves are right at the very top of the tree. And this is very important when it comes to fire management or just fires generally in forests. And if I have time, I'll talk about that as well. So West Thumb then is not anywhere near as popular as the other geyser basins, but it's so beautiful and it has such a great assortment of geysers, particularly those right on the lake. Yes, you do get geysers that are underwater. There are some geysers that never used to be under the water line, but as Yellowstone Lake has, as the water level has increased over the years, so the geysers have gone underwater. Now there's a geyser there called Fishing Cone, and that's probably West Thumb's most famous feature. Fishing Cone is a geyser where people actually used to cook fish, hence the name. It's a cone geyser as opposed to a fountain geyser. People used to catch fish in there. The story goes that there was a fisherman fishing there, and I guess it was somewhere around probably the 1870s, and he accidentally flipped his fish over so that it went into the geyser and it came out cooked. After that, the word spread around, and Fishing Cone became even more popular than Old Faithful. People would go down to Fishing Cone and pose there with cooking aprons and cooking hats on and chef's hats on and take pictures of themselves with fish cooked in Fishing Cone Geyser. In fact, the superintendent at the time, Yellowstone's second superintendent, Philetus Norris, who was superintendent here, I think, from 1878 to 1882, he used to take his visitors there, and they all used to laugh and carry on and try and cook their fish in Fishing Cone Geyser. In fact, there were stories about members of Congress hooting and hollering, and those were the words that I read in the story, about the fishing and cooking exploits down at Fishing Cone. Well, just as happened with Handkerchief Spring at Black Sand Geyser Basin, so the practice became outlawed, and you can no longer either fish there or, for that matter, cook your fish in Fishing Cone Geyser anymore. But it sure must have been fun in the old days. In addition to various of the other thermal features, there are two really incredible hot springs to be found at West Thumb Geyser Basin: Black Pool and Abyss Pool, both of which are really stunning and so incredibly clear. If there's not steam blown in your direction, you can see down towards the bottom a long way below. Anyway, time now to get back to the Continental Divide. I mentioned that we cross over the Continental Divide twice on this route between West Thumb and the Upper Geyser Basin. We cross over it once on the road between the south entrance to Yellowstone and West Thumb, which you can see in another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. The Continental Divide is an imaginary line running in a general south-north direction, and I'll explain why general south-north or north-south direction up and down the United States. And what it does is it divides the US into two gigantic watersheds. And what I mean by that is, consider the pitched roof of a house. Water that, rain that falls on the roof of that house could dribble down on either side of the roof. Well, consider the Continental Divide as a pitched roof. Water that falls on the east side, precipitation, snow, rain that comes down on the east side of the Continental Divide will theoretically land up in the Atlantic Ocean. Precipitation that falls on the west side of the Continental Divide will theoretically land up in the Pacific Ocean. So, and this over here is the parking lot to a trailhead, to an overview of Shoshone Lake. That point is significant for a couple of reasons. That little pullout is almost exactly halfway between West Thumb and Old Faithful. And then in addition, Shoshone Lake is the largest lake in the United States, and please wait. Shoshone Lake is the largest lake in the United States that you cannot get to by road. You can only hike there. It's a very interesting series of bodies of water actually. You've got Shoshone Lake, and then the Lewis River flows south out of Shoshone Lake, and the 3-mile stretch of the Lewis River between Shoshone Lake and Lewis Lake is one of the only stretches of water in the park where you're allowed to boat. And then from Lewis Lake, the Lewis River flows out through over Lewis Falls and through Lewis Canyon before merging into the Snake River and actually changing its direction a bit. I deal with this in a lot more detail in another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours, but it's interesting that the river and the lake and the falls and the canyon were named after Captain Meriwether Lewis from the Lewis and Clark expedition, because as far as we know, he didn't actually come down to the Yellowstone area. Once the Lewis and Clark expedition had made it out as far as the west coast, and they turned around and came back, Lewis and Clark divided their parties. And it was actually Captain William Clark who, although he never saw the thermal features in Yellowstone, he did come pretty close to some of them. Sacagawea, who was their Native American guide, this is the other time we're going over the Continental Divide, and I promise I will get back to the story. Sacagawea, remember the name Isa Lake, and see those water lilies? Sacagawea pointed out a route to them over what we now call Bozeman Pass, which is a section of road between the southwestern Montana city of Bozeman and Livingston, which is also a town in southwest Montana. And at that point, Captain Clark was only 40 miles to the north of Mammoth Hot Springs. It's a little ironic that with Lewis and Clark being such great explorers and such great trailblazers through the area, that Clark didn't know he was so close to the thermal features, and in fact they made their way down the Yellowstone River, but that is the subject of another story. Let's get back to the Continental Divide. I was telling you how the Continental Divide divides the United States into two gigantic watersheds, and it runs in a general north-south or south-north direction. The reason I say general is that that part of the Continental Divide that we've just passed through is actually running in an east-west, west-east direction. If you go back and take another look at that map that I mentioned to you at westyellowstonelodge.com/map, you'll notice that instead of running north-south, the Continental Divide is in fact running east-west. So this makes it a little more tricky. It's precipitation that falls to the south of the divide goes into the Pacific Ocean. Precipitation that falls to the north of the divide goes into the Atlantic Ocean. And you recall I mentioned to you that little lake right at the very top. It's so beautiful up there, especially if you go there on a day when there's not that many people. Geyser Lake is located at altitude, obviously, because it's right on the Continental Divide, but it has water lilies, and who would expect to see water lilies this far north and at this elevation? It always makes such a great picture. The other more unique feature about Geyser Lake is that it's one of very few lakes in the entire world that drains in two directions over a divide. So you've got precipitation, you've got water flowing out of Geyser Lake that, as I mentioned, is going both north and south, and it's draining in both directions. And if you do visit Geyser Lake, just walk around there for a while and you'll see what I mean by that. We're now dropping down off the Continental Divide, and we're dropping down what's known as Craig Pass. When Yellowstone opens in the spring, this road is one of the last roads to open. The last road in the entire park to open is Dunraven Pass, and that gets up to almost 10,000 feet. That is the stretch of road that runs between Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone and Tower Falls. And it climbs up so high, and there's so much snow up at the top there, that the authorities generally only open that road towards the end of May, just before Memorial Day, depending on the amounts of snow up there. Then the last road but one to open is this road here, Craig Pass. You'll have the road from West Yellowstone into Madison Junction and then on to Old Faithful and going in the other direction up to Norris and then Mammoth and across to Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. That road generally opens somewhere just after about the middle of April. But because Craig Pass is so high, obviously it climbs up over the Continental Divide. There is so much snow here that it's not possible to open it earlier. And so the authorities only open it several weeks after many of the other roads in the park have opened. In recent years, the Park Service has been a lot more proactive about when to shut the roads down in the early spring and fall after they've opened, because of early spring or late fall snow, and the roads become treacherous and there are other people not get stranded. And my battery is about to expire, so I am going to pull off, and I'll continue in a moment with another device. I have been talking about the Continental Divide. There is also a trail called the Continental Divide Trail, and that's one of the longest hiking trails anywhere. It runs all the way from Mexico in the south up to Canada in the north, and we have people doing the Continental Divide Trail coming through Yellowstone, and they generally try and come through here after the middle of June and before about the third week of September, so they don't have to plow through snow. And we operate Yellowstone Taxi, and we'll often get calls from people when they're crossing the divide about 10 miles to the west of West Yellowstone. They need a break, they want to come into West Yellowstone, they've sent supplies to West Yellowstone, and we go pick them up, listen to some incredible stories, and then a few days later take them back out onto the Divide Trail. We're going to be coming up to the Lone Star Geyser trailhead very soon, and the Lone Star Geyser trail is actually part of the Continental Divide Trail. So this is also where people want to be picked up and taken somewhere. You can see it says there Lone Star Geyser, and the trail is down there. It's a really pretty geyser. You can't take your car down, but you can walk or you can bike. This over here is Kepler Cascade. A cascade is basically a series of smaller waterfalls cascading down over a shorter distance. And Kepler Cascade is a feature that was named by the superintendent of Yellowstone, who I'd mentioned, Philetus Norris. He had the governor of the state of Wyoming visiting. You'll recall that 97% of Yellowstone is in Wyoming, approximately 2% is in Montana, and 1% is in Idaho. Anyway, the governor of Wyoming was visiting the park, and his son's name was Kepler, hence the name Kepler Cascade that Norris gave that feature. We're starting to drop down now to the Upper Geyser Basin area. I'd mentioned before that there are three main geyser basins in Yellowstone: the Upper Geyser Basin, the Midway Geyser Basin, and the Lower Geyser Basin. In this area as well, there's two other really beautiful geyser basins, Black Sand Basin, and out of force of habit, I always look when we're going over a bridge to see if there's animals there, particularly bears or moose, but no such luck. It's more of a vain hope than anything else. There's also two other great geyser basins in this area. Black Sand Basin, so called because of the tiny particles that have been chipped away from the obsidian in the area, and then Biscuit Basin, which was so named because of the deposits that used to surround Sapphire Pool before Sapphire Pool, which is a hot spring, erupted as a geyser after the Hebgen Lake earthquake. But that's also another story which I explain in a lot more detail in the Biscuit Basin virtual Yellowstone tour. There is so much more. Oh, and by the way, the reason that we're coming to a stop here, or slowing down, is because there was road construction on the bridge that comes out of Old Faithful. And while the contractors were doing the road construction, they discovered that part of the bridge was fundamentally unstable, so cars are no longer allowed to go over the bridge, and instead there's this really interesting detour. It never used to be a road. It only became a road once there was the bridge issue. This really is a trail that runs between employee housing, which you may be able to see through the trees over there, and the Old Faithful area, which is off in that direction. You can see some really old lodging over there, those really beautiful old cabins. So normally this tour would stop, this virtual Yellowstone tour would stop at the bridge, where you would turn off the main Grand Loop Road to head up towards the Old Faithful area and the rest of the Upper Geyser Basin. Instead, we have this detour, and that will take us to the parking lots, the main parking lots at Old Faithful. These are some of the buildings at Old Faithful. We can't really see the inn from where we are. I was trying to see if I can see it through the trees. It's over there in that direction. There is the inn over there. Well, once again, I know I've left a lot of stories out there that I haven't had an opportunity to finish. If you do have any questions, please feel free to ask in the comments section below, or you can email us. You'll find the details below, or also tweet at us. Thank you so much for joining me on another one. Actually, let me give you this little tip. Here is a locals tip. Normally, you will just have a look at this road over here towards Old Faithful Inn. Normally, you see that sign that says geyser parking, and you'll see other signs that say that. They're trying to get you to park way away from Old Faithful Inn, but if you turn left the first opportunity you can and park at Old Faithful Inn, there's a big parking lot there, you're a lot closer to most of the boardwalks and you're a lot closer to Old Faithful. Having said that, it's time to end this virtual Yellowstone tour. Well, once again, before I do that, I was talking about the bridge being out of order, and that's where the bridge is shut down over there. Once again, thank you so much for joining me on another one of our virtual Yellowstone tours. If you enjoy our virtual Yellowstone tour series, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Otherwise, see you in Yellowstone.